Welcome to the future of payroll and workforce management insights by HR.com, your go-to resource for insights into payroll and workforce management. From navigating compliance and technology trends to exploring the latest in global payroll solutions, we're here to keep you ahead of the curve. Join us as we dive into the forces reshaping payroll and share practical strategies to optimize your workforce management. Let's get started. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Future of Payroll and Workforce Management, a podcast here at HR.com, where I am executive community leader of payroll, Future of Payroll, excuse me. I should know what I do here, and a few other things. Actually, I forget all the things I do here, so many things. Anyway, enough about me. My guest today is Max van der Klis-Busink. Welcome, Max.
Thank you, Brent, and a perfect pronunciation of my very difficult Dutch name. I'm very proud to be on your podcast. So thanks so much for having me, Brent.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yay, me. I got your name pronounced
Yay!
right. Awesome. Awesome. Well, now you're the author of a book, The Global Payroll Manager's Playbook. Wonderful. Wonderful. Yes. And we'll have a link for that when the podcast is up online. And we have a really interesting topic today. It's going to be around payroll transformation fatigue. And it's really interesting, but you're an interesting guy all around. And I like
Thank
to
you.
ask everyone on my podcast this same question. It's basically, what's your passion in this space? What galvanizes you? What gets you out of bed every day, ripping and roaring in the world of work?
What a great question. But I think what gets me out of bed is my alarm, Brent. But after I switch off my alarm, I switch on payroll. I've been in this space for nearly 2 decades now, 19 years. I started on the 7th of June, 2006. I knew nothing of payroll, but I fell in love with payroll, global payroll, domestic payroll. And what drives this passion is, I think it's maybe one of the most undervalued, underrated professions, yet one of the most critical professions. If you ask me, any company, what would they at least need to do is pay people, regardless of their industry. They could outsource this, they could do it in-house, but we keep the world spinning. I think we are responsible for about 60% of any government's revenues, Brett. And equivalent, we're responsible for an accurate representation of labor cost in the P&L of any given company of at least 50%. That's what we do. And we make sure my neighbor gets to go to the groceries and pay. They don't get a big tax bill afterwards because we've done our payroll right. We touch everyone's lives, every business, and every tax authority or social security agency around the world. And if this guy from the Netherlands, Max, can contribute a little bit to the profession by talking to you, talking to others, writing a book, then that's what motivates me. It's the people in the payroll profession that motivate me.
I'm so glad you brought up this topic because it's another really important theme that we've been actually following on the podcast with several guests. There, a lot of folks, they kind of, they accidentally sort of stumble into payroll. Most people stumble into payroll as a career, and a lot of people, not everybody stays, but the people who do, they really like it. And it's really interesting how that happens. And to say that you fell in love with payroll, that is honestly,
Don't
that's
tell my wife,
heartwarming to
Brent.
hear. I mean, yeah, because this is so important to people's lives. You're affecting their lives, and you're also you're bumping up against or you're interacting with finance all the time too. Like you are like at this intersection of so many things in the organization when you were involved in payroll. And
I
maybe
sometimes say, Brent, we are the heartbeat of labor-related information across the organization and basically the world.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And maybe we'll have you back for another episode to talk about this as well,
Do
because it
that.
fits right in. Let's shift though to payroll transformation fatigue, right? You and I were in the green room a couple of weeks ago, just chatting about this and figuring out, okay, what do we want to talk about on the podcast? And we hear about payroll transformation or any business transformation when it comes to any business process, right? All the time. And there's some fatigue around it. It's one of those really buzzy words, transformation.
Yeah.
And we hear so much about it out there, and there's a lot of chatter, like how to do it right, how to, what you're doing wrong. But there's sort of a burnout that's kind of a natural byproduct of constant change. Um, and so, we're going to dive into that a little bit. And let's start off with this question. So you've said transformation fatigue is real in payroll. What is it, and what signs do you see of it in payroll today?
Yeah, thanks. It's really a topic dear to my heart. And I started thinking about this actually pretty recently when we had the Payroll Congress of Payroll Org in Orlando. And I was walking the floor, 2,300 payroll professionals on the one very big dome roof. Um, and I've been to the executive summits, to very futuristic talks, and I tend to speak to the people that might be a little bit shy, the payroll clerks, the payroll administrators, the payroll accountants. And I'm like, that's probably representing 80% of our population. And I ask them, have you been through a payroll transformation? They say, yes. I said, do you feel transformed? They say, no, not at all. Has your life become easier? No, it has not become easier. I say, well, what was then the aim of the transformation? They say, well, honestly, Max, I don't really know. We have done a vendor switch, but we're basically just doing the same thing on another platform with another name. And then I sat back and said, geez, there's a big disconnect between what we call transformation, right? What's real transformation is really significantly shifting what you're doing to doing it very differently, right? I see the interchangeability between transformation and just a project, right? A project to switch a provider, implement a new process, implement a new benefit. But transformation, in my book, right, but you can keep me honest, is more of I'm really significantly going to rethink what I'm doing, right? To make it another impact. And that's what we're doing. And I think there's a lot of fatigue with payroll professionals that either don't buy into the transformation because they see it doesn't really transform them. And they have never been asked, hey, what would benefit you on the ground? What do you need, right, to help us achieve this goal? And the other thing is, it's great to see slide decks of transformation, but someone needs to actually do it, right?
Mhm.
And those people have been in finance, HR transformations for a very long time. Because guess what? Any transformation in either of those functions requires payroll's participation. Now, it's a very long answer to your question, Brent, so I'll pause there.
No, that's fine. I mean, you touched on so many things that we talked about, just that there could even be apathy around
Mm,
around payroll transformation. Oh yeah, transformation again, right? Sort
yeah,
of, yeah, rolling of the eyes or whatever. Um, and I think a lot of folks who, excuse me, leaders who advocate for transformation, or even vendors in the space that have it in their marketing messaging, and we hear about it all over the place, and in the trade organizations, professional organizations that we all
mm,
belong to and interact with, right? There's this beating of the drum, sort of this inexorable march, that we hear about, this existential march toward payroll
yeah,
transformation. It becomes uh, white noise. It becomes the hum of the refrigerator, and it and it also becomes maybe even a little bit annoying sometimes,
a
right?
little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and so what are some things that we can do to kind of disrupt that apathetic sort of, eye rolling thing that's happening, right? With among the I don't want to say the rank and file, because everybody in payroll is absolutely essential in doing a really, really important job. I mean, obviously, you know, there are the role is evolving, all this sort of stuff, right? But there's so many people in payroll, and we kind of, I think when we pontificate about payroll transformation as this great, wonderful thing, which it absolutely can be, right?
Yeah.
There is, just as with so many other things, there's this this propensity or this tendency, a tendency to think of the folks that it'll be affecting as sort of this monolithic,
Mhm.
blob almost, right? And it's
Yeah,
there's nothing sort of, there's no ill will in that. It's just kind of a way of thinking. So how do we disrupt ourselves and I'm not even calling myself a leader necessarily in payroll transformation, but sort of the royal ourselves. How do we disrupt ourselves, change our tactics, our approach to sort of, short circuit, excuse me, this kind of thinking?
yeah, I think it's a great question. I'll share some thoughts. It's not a definitive answer because I ponder about this day and night. So my answer might change tomorrow and the day after. But what I'm thinking today is, um, let's rethink what transformation is. Right? Let's not make it this big theme that's very scary. Let's just call it as it is. Hey, this is what we want to achieve, and this is what we need to achieve it. And I think the word leader, we need a more bottom up approach than a top down approach. Because a leader doesn't sit in a title, right? I could be a global payroll director or a VP, but let's try to transform the lives of the actual payroll professionals, the people who are. It's the 26th when we record this. The most of the payrolls in Europe have a monthly payroll. They have all just paid. These people went from spreadsheet to spreadsheet to payroll rejection to review. That's their day in, day out business. And when you look at your transformation project, how are you going to transform the lives of these people that actually process or review payroll, whether it's on the vendor side, whether it's on the enterprise side? What do they need to transform to be able to go on leave without bringing their laptop? To be able to not have so many spreadsheets open, to really rethink payday, for instance, right? Is it just a fixed moment in a month or not? What are we doing for those people? What if we would say those people are the leaders? Let's ask them, hey, what would you need to truly transform what you're doing?
Right. That's a really good point. I think so many folks that advocate for payroll transformation, they go into it with a preconceived notion of what they think that transformation needs to be. And it might not be wrong, but it's really important. In fact, it probably isn't, but there is that need to understand what the folks that are in payroll every single day doing it think would actually transform their payroll process. There's a deeply ingrained cadence to payroll process, the workflow. It's and it repeats. It's a
Yep.
cadence that repeats. It's very familiar cadence. Um, it can be it can be grueling or less grueling depending on what kind of technology you have in place and process and structure you have in place for payroll, right? But all payrolls at every organization, there's this common denominator of sort of a cadence. Is a predictable. You think about other people's jobs in the organization,
Yeah.
right? There is some predictability, but there's less, real repeatable cadence like that. And so if you're going in there talking with if you're going in there with the intent of initiating a payroll transformation project, it's really important to get into the weeds of what that particular organization's what are the granularities of that particular cadence, so you can understand what that organization needs to transform its payroll.
Yeah, and don't get me, I'm not against payroll transformation. I've been part of transformation a long time, but it usually was either an HR initiated transformation that payroll was part of, or a finance led transformation that payroll was part of. I'll tell you a story. I work for a company that I shall not name, but it is a web hosting company, very tech based.
Mhm.
Together with my team, in 1 year, we've transformed payroll without spending a single dollar,
Mm. Wow.
without switching to any new providers, but we have transformed our lives. That is by just looking at what do we actually need to improve. There were a lot of data issues. We set up very simple Google Sheets with KPIs and error monitoring. We said, okay, you do controls this way, you do controls that way. Let's get together. Let's harmonize it. Hey, APAC, what's your best practice? Hey, EMEA, what's your best practice? Let's do that together. Does this make your life easier? Yes. Hey, my APAC friend, if you go on leave, do you have a substitute? No. I said, okay, EMEA, APAC, you need to be able to be interchangeable. Oh, but that's difficult. I said, yes. I never said it was easy, but I'll be here to support. I said, what else matters? Well, we have a lot of issues with GLs. I said, okay, I'll connect you with GLs. After a year, we have made all the incremental changes that made them go on leave without their laptop. And that's transformative in their payroll lives without spending a single dollar. Employees got 100% accurate pay. Finance got their GLs. HR knew, hey, we give you this feedback because we care about the employees. That's one of our core values, right? Yes, right. I said, well, it's our job to highlight to you what we need to deliver on that promise on that employee experience. It was a lot of effort, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, but $0. And that transformed their lives.
That is amazing. That is amazing. Couple things come to mind here. One is you've sort of you've underscored the idea that payroll transformation isn't a silver bullet. That means, or it doesn't necessarily mean a switch in the software. Doesn't necessarily mean that. It can. It can. There's a lot of, there are a lot of software implementations, deployments that that there's a payroll transformation that's concurrent to that, and this just because that's what naturally is
Makes
happening,
sense.
right? But you absolutely can go in there and transform yourselves without bringing in a new software variable. And I want to just also call out something that I really sort of inferred, you implied strongly here, is that, well, this is what I got from it, is that, and it goes back to that cadence, right? You're in that as a payroll person, making sure payroll is happening on time, everyone gets paid on time and correctly every time. It's hard to kind of just step back and think about that process and how to improve it or to streamline it. Improve, which means to streamline it or to expand it or all these
Yeah.
sorts of things, because you are so focused on that goal of paying everybody on time correctly every time. And so it's how do organizations get out of that how do you kind of get out of yourself as a payroll person to start thinking about how to transform your payroll process?
Yeah, that's that's a great question. I'll probably say one shameless plug, you can hire me as a consultant.
Of course.
However, I'm also a do-it-yourself guy. My main theme when I'm being asked, hey, what are the skill sets of the future for a payroll professional? For me, is a status quo breaker. Is always challenge the way things are happening today. And then be motivated enough to put your heads not down, but up and say, hey, who do I need to collaborate with to make this change? And make very small incremental changes. That's why I always find the word transformation difficult. When I did this project, I could tell you it was at Zoom. I've never used the word transformation, but I knew we were transforming. Afterwards, I said, hey, do you feel like you've been kind of it transformed? They said, yes. So they said, oh, did we actually go through a payroll transformation? It says, yes, you did.
That's great.
But you didn't know. Start with incremental changes that have very quick wins, right? Like what I did is harmonize the pay date.
Mhm.
Something simple as let's harmonize the pay, which is a lot of effort. You have to go to contracts, collective bargaining agreements. We say, if we harmonize it, we have a peak, but after that peak, we can relax a bit.
Yeah.
Will that make your life easier? Yes. So I'd say talk to the people who actually deliver pay. And yes, there are other organizational themes and initiatives that you will need to link it to, right? If you're higher up, you need to link it to your either functional goals or your business goals. Fine, do that. But then spin it in a way that the people actually working for you benefit from it. And what I used to say, Brent, is to my team, my last resort is to implement a new payroll provider. I
Yeah.
said, that's my last resort. And why? Because it's super difficult and challenging. Whatever provider you will do, switching from one to the other takes a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. And of course, if your provider is lacking compliance, there could be a need that you need to. But I said, let's make it work. I asked my team, are you married? A lot of them say yes. I said, when in your first fight, do you immediately divorce or do you try to make it work? They say, of course, we try to make it work. I said, we might even go to mediation. I said, that's the relationship of a customer with a payroll provider. Try to make it work. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And you've really kind of touched on one other piece of it, and maybe the couple minutes we have left, excuse me, that we have left. Um,
Yeah.
there's there's an engagement and employee well-being factor to this for the actual, because payroll people are employees too, right? And we want them
Exactly. Yeah.
engaged, and we want them to have a level of employee well-being and a positive employee experience. And I think we've really touched on here a way to do that, because if you just focused on making it happen every time, uh, it, and you're just in that same process, that can get you become disengaged as an employee
Yeah.
and unhappy. And so if you're focused on making it better for the payroll folks are making better for themselves, focusing on improving things, that's definitely a demonstrable impact on their experience.
And then you get them on board. And if there then is a new transformation imposed on it, they say, yes, let's do it, right? Because we are already in a good space and we're protecting our good space. Let's see what else we can do to improve. But then the baseline is already solved. Like all of these people I speak to, they say, I have an AI talk over here, and I have the future of work here, which all has its purpose and is really nice. But then they say, I listen to that while I am reconciling input versus output in Excel, um, and it takes me a long time, and now it crashes because forgot to save it. And
When
that's just the day in the life of a payroll professional who get this, as you call it, white noise, which should be there because we should change, but there is a disconnect between the talk and the day-to-day reality. So maybe call me the voice of payroll reason. Um, and I think we need to change that narrative a little bit. Let's transform, but maybe transform for the sake of the payroll people who are employees themselves too.
Yeah, yeah, transforming from the bottom up. I think that's, yeah. Max, thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast. This has been a really illuminating conversation.
Thank you for having me, Brent. I'd love to come back. It's a very good flowing conversation between us. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for tuning in to the Future of Workforce Management and Payroll Insights by HR.com. We hope today's episode brought you valuable insights and fresh perspectives on the future of payroll and workforce management. Be sure to check out more episodes and explore resources at HR.com/podcast or wherever you listen to podcasts. Until next time, keep innovating and making a difference in the world of payroll and workforce management.